Hello, my fellow readers. This is iDark Symphony 777 with a more relaxing video. Honestly, I'm literally just woke up and it's like, I'm gonna do a video today because I didn't do a video this entire week because my job was doing inventory and I had to be there all day, literally all week except for Sunday and today. And I couldn't do Sunday because I was helping my friend out and that lasted all day. And I didn't, and I am just way too bundled up to do like an actual review. So I thought, I'm gonna do something dumb and more relaxing and something to stimulate the brain and that sort of deal. So I realized I have a bunch of novelizations that I reviewed over these years, and I thought, I'll just do a tier list of the novelizations. It's an idea that popped up into my mind this morning when I woke, last night, because I really needed to get a video done, and I don't know if I'll be able to do a proper review this week. So, we got these. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We got 11 stories. And oh boy, we're going to do 11 stories. Oh boy. So before I get into it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications. So, what makes a novelization a novelization? A novelization is a term used to describe any visual artwork, any visual piece of art to be translated into a written piece of art. The opposite of that being a adaptation. So, like, I want to do a video game based off Harry Potter. Let's just talk about, Hogwarts Legacy. That's technically an adaptation that's set in the world. Or if you want to do more broader, the legend of the new Mario movie coming out, that's technically an adaptation. Granted, it's kind of a retelling because it's gonna be set in its own universe sort of thing, but it is technically, for all intents and purposes, an adaptation. However, a novelization would be you take the Mario movie and you turn it into a book. Or any sort of like a poem or something. That's technically a novelization sort of thing. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like with adaptations, there's more of an open broadness to it, while with novelization, you're pretty much just restricted to a book. However, I know about storytelling. I know how stories and all this work, and I can tell you, novelizations have always been one of the hardest stories to actually write because of so many different factors that it takes a lot of skill and a lot of time to be able to get it right. You need to know what you have to adapt as much as you can, unlike an adaptation where you can do broad strokes and kind of skip some things that don't really mean anything. With a novelization, you have to, if something has a game mechanic, you gotta include the game mechanic. Doesn't matter how you include it, you gotta include it, because then people will get upset. You also have to make sure the plot is still coherent, but also, you have to try and stretch it as much as possible to include as much stuff as you can from the thing you're novelizing. And it has to be the same plot. You have to more deeply explore certain elements. There's a lot to a novelization, and we'll go over that more as we go along. Now, before I get into the actual tier list, you may notice that there is a certain story missing, that being Alice Reflections of Madness, which is not a novelization. It is a retelling of the events of Alice Madness Returns on the PS3 for Steam now, because I don't as far as I know, I don't really think you can get Madness Returns on PS3 anymore. I don't think you can, but you never know. You never know. So why is a Reflection of Madness not on here? But Beyond the Shattered Looking Glass is a novelization. Reflection of Madness is a retelling. The difference is the Reflections changes so much of the events of Madness Returns that it's not even the same story anymore. Because for instance, in Madness Returns, Alice is more closer to a villain protagonist. She's very selfish. When she wants to kill, spoiler alerts for Madness Returns, when she wants to kill the Dollmaker, she does it more out of revenge for what he did to her sister. While in Reflections of Madness, Alice is more presented as a more heroic light, a more sympathetic light. And when she wants to, and the reason why she doesn't even want to kill the Dollmaker. She wants him arrested because in essence, it would be worth more to suffer and bring proper closure to all the people he's corrupted and all the children he's prostituted out. There's a big difference in our characters. There's a big difference in how a lot of the events of the game turn out. All the Wonderland characters have completely different roles. The climax is completely different because the Dollmaker is fought on the train in the game, but the Dollmaker is not on the train in Reflections. The Jabberwock shows up at the climax of Reflections, so a completely new element that's not in Madness. So, there's just so much stuff that changes between these two versions of this tale of Alice Little that you literally cannot call it a novelization. Well, Beyond the Shattered Looking Glass, you can. So we're going to go by this one by one. So the first one we got is Mario and Luigi and Bowser by Wakazoo. It is a novelization of Mario and Luigi, Bowser's Inside Story for the Nintendo DS. And I just realized something. I never really said how I would be ranking these. Okay, so this is the crap I get for wanting to record off the cuff. Well, I always record off the cuff in the morning, literally right after I wake up. I'll be ranking these based on how well they do their jobs at being a novelization, not on the quality of the story itself. Because honestly, if it was on the quality of the story itself, this story would just be S tier and everything else will be below it. But we're going to be basing it on how well does it adapt as many elements and how well does it perfectly encapsulate what it's trying to do as a novelization. So a story could be a bad story, but it could be a good novelization. But it could be good as incorporating the novelization aspects into it, and vice versa. You can be bad at it, but it can still be a good story. But then again, that one becomes a retelling. So with Mario, Luigi, and Bowser, there's not really much that changes in the overall plot, mainly because this story doesn't really focus on Mario and Luigi and Bowser as the main characters. That's the one crucial difference in the story from Bowser's Inside Story. Starlo is the main character in this story. And all the story is basically the events of the story through her eyes. So you get her perspective, you get her thoughts, you get how she grows as a character from a very bright-eyed, passionate little star spirit to someone who believes that there is various shades of gray going on in the Mushroom Kingdom, because she gets to know Bowser and realizes he's not bad as he seems, and it looks like the star spirits, the people that she works for, are basically okay with endangering people if it means Bowser gets taken out. And it's a really, really thoughtful story. It does keep, like I said, on the novelization aspects, it keeps everything. It keeps all the various elements of the game. It keeps all the various locations being Starlo using Bowser's hammer space and magic to mentally create all these areas, basically, so that way the Toads and Peach and Mario and Luigi, they don't go insane. Granted, spoiler alert for the story. It is revealed at the end that at least Mario and Luigi were kind of new the entire time, that Starla was basically creating these areas, and she's kind of like stumped. It's like, but you still did good, Starlo. You still did good. Granted, Bowser doesn't know. He just knows that something was funky going on with his hammer space magic and stuff like that. As a story, this would be S tier. Like I alluded, it would be S tier, no problem. But as a novelization, it goes firmly. Dang it. Can I get? There we go. It goes firmly in the A tier. It doesn't really do. It does everything really well. It's just the change from Mario and Luigi and Bowser's point of view to the fact it's exclusively told through Starlo. Granted, Bowser, anytime when it goes to Bowser, he's there too, but like I said, it's the entire story is based around Starlo. And the whole events of the game, or it's just a backdrop for her character and her character arc. They don't add anything new to the story, except for more like a scientific detail of the whole thing. But on the whole, as a novelization, it's good, but it doesn't, and it bridges everything. You know what? I'm gonna bump this to A. I'm S tier. I'm up to S tier. It does everything as good as it can be. It keeps everything coherent. It keeps everything united, because that's a big thing with novelization, because of how games work, especially if you're novelizing a game. How do you stretch out the moments between like the big set pieces, like the cutscenes and the boss fights? How do you bridge them out? This story does that perfectly by just having Starlo wander and think about things, about the Star Spirits, about Bowser, about Mario and Luigi, how she's going to plan everything out, her growing concern and doubt on the Star Spirits' abilities to manipulate fate, and her overall more worldview kind of shattering piece by piece as she's realizing that not everything is as black and white, and that's really well done. So let's go to the next one. Phoenix Wright Turnabout Storm by Firesight. Oh, this is the novelization of the web series, the web short, which is Phoenix Wright Turnabout Storm. And just like Mario and Luigi and Bowser, it's going to get an S tier. Ah, there we go. Let me just need to get it in there. Need to get it in there. There we go. There we go. So why is this an A tier? Because it incorporates elements that were actually that were inferred and implied in the web series, and it explores them in more detail. Namely, the fact that this web series actually foreshadowed the Black Psyche-Locks before the franchise actually did. So this story came out, I think, in 2011. I honestly can't remember what year the actual web series came out in, but a big random out of the blue plot point was when Twilight had the power of the Magatama, which means she could see Psyche-Locks. She inadvertently sets off Trixie, and it creates these Black Psyche-Locks, and at the time, no one's ever heard of them. And then when Ace Attorney... No, not Ace Attorney 4. Apollo, the Apollo game. Was it Apollo or was it Athena site? I can't remember if it was Kristoff that had the Black Psyche-Locks, or no. It was Athena. When Athena Sykes was introduced to the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series. She had blocked Psyche Lux, and that came after Turnabout Storm. However, the team never really did anything with the blocky Psyche Lux. It was implied that they were going to do something with the Psyche Lux. However, there was problems with the script at the end that they couldn't really fit this the ending of this specific plot point, and so they kind of just abandoned it. And that's kind of like the reason why it's S tier is there's other plot points that were introduced in this web series that were never finished. There was a whole point of how did Trixie become a lawyer to get revenge on Twilight. There was the whole very, very long reveal over Pinky and Glinda. There wasn't really, and also Zukora and also the race, and there's a lot of plot points that weren't really finished because they wanted to focus on the criminal aspect, so that kind of left like a lot of the side plots kind of hanging. And that's what the story fixed, in the fact it gave proper conclusions to all of these side points. There is the added benefit of there is a romance between Phoenix Wright and Twilight Sparkle. However, that doesn't really detract from it being an S tier, because it doesn't really change anything except for that. Like, that is the only thing. What the hell? Okay, so am I still recording? I keep forgetting if I'm still recording. All right. There. Yeah, I had to check if I'm still recording, because it's getting hot in here, because I'm in my car, because every time when I try and record in my house, that my family just keeps yelling and screaming, and me and my family, and I have like no chance to properly record, so I have to do it in my car. I hate my family. But where was I? Oh yes. The Phoenix Wright Twilight Sparkle romance. There is, like I said, that is the only thing new that they add to the story. Everything else is just they just finish everything, and the romance aspect doesn't really impact or even change the story that much. Granted, it does create a very, very weird sequel. Not going to talk about that. But on the whole, Turnabout Storm does do everything right with a novelization. Let's go to a bad one. The End by Ghost Gaming. This is I'm gonna do these two. Because these are the weird ones. Because these are not full novelizations. These are partial novelizations. However, I decided to lump these in here because they technically count. So, they're here. The End by Ghost Gaming. This is a novelization of the ending cutscene from the Black Ops 2. No, not Black Ops 2. Black Ops 4 Aether storyline. So, the Call of Duty Zombies storyline is really, really long and convoluted and weird. But to put this in perspective, the final cutscene that this is supposed to novelize is the scene where Ultimus Nikolai realizes that as long as all of them are still alive, then the cycle of all the events of all the Aether maps from Black Ops 1 to Black Ops 4 are going to keep repeating over and over and over again. And so in order for this cycle to end, all of them need to die. And Nikolai was the only one who kind of realized this, because the rest of them were just kind of like in their own, like for different reasons, we're like okay with the cycle constantly repeating. And so what happens is Nikolai poisons the alcohol of all of the other members except for himself, and then also Samantha, Maxis, and Eddie, who are supposed to be like a different there's like alternate realities, who's a different version of Edward Richtofen. And then after he poisons them, he gets a zombie Richtofen. Again, it's really weird. He shoots that thing so that way it doesn't, because that Richtofen has to die. And then he hands the gun to Samantha, who at this time is like a little 8-year-old girl, and tells her to shoot him. And she does. And then now that all they died, that entire universe is collapsing in itself, and Samantha and Eddie leave, and their adventures continue in Black Ops Cold War. This is just a straight novelization of the scene down to the minutiae. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't add anything. Like, that was honestly this was one of the worst fan fictions I ever read, because it really doesn't do its job well as a novelization. Why is that? Well, as I said, it's a straight 1-for-1 novelization of this one specific cutscene. So what's the problem? Well, a thing with novelization is they're supposed to add to the context, give us insight on what the characters are thinking in each of the characters' interpretation. That doesn't exist here. This is just a straight 1-for-1 novelization of the cutscene. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't give us insights on any of the characters, anyone, not even Samantha, not even Eddie, not even Nikolai. I honestly, having this story would have been so much better if we had insight on Nikolai's process throughout the entire, like a retrospective of like the Black Ops 3 maps, as well as Origins, and then the Black Ops 4 Aether maps, like his whole journey to coming to this realization. That would have been good. That would have been fine. Honestly, at that point, it probably would have gotten an A tier. However, since it doesn't add anything, it doesn't change anything. No, not even changing. It doesn't add anything. When I finished reading it, it made me say I'd rather watch the cutscene than watch this, because so much. This is just a nothing story. This is just a nothing novelization. Even if it's only a single cutscene, it goes in the F tier. It goes in the F tier. The whole point of a novelization is supposed to add context to certain scenes, while also giving us another avenue to enjoy something that we love. With Mario, Luigi, and Bowser, it changed a lot of stuff, but still kept the central plot, the central characters. They didn't really change much. It just added a bunch of context. With Phoenix Wright, it added a bunch of context by finishing off storyline, by unfinished plot lines that were not finished in the web series. With the end, that's nothing. It's nothing. And it's nothing. Might as well get this one out of with, too. By the crystal shards. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting, because this is a novelization of a couple of cutscenes from Kirby 64: The Crystal Shards. Namely, it's a novelization of the Popstar cutscenes. And I lost my thought for some reason, because it's hot. It's hot in here. It's so hot in here. I need to open the door. It adds some context, because it does give us like thought process on what they're thinking of, or how they're doing something, or why they're there. Like with the Waddle Dee is specifically Banana Waddle Dee. Retrospectively, I'm okay with that Waddle Dee being Bandana Waddle Dee. That's fine, and he's literally just wandering around Popstar. He's just a wanderer. He's like, he just walks and wanders. He's just there. He happens to be there. That's fine. And giving us insight on like a more broader version of the events of these cutscenes. It does feature a little added thing of like at the end, where all of Kirby's animal pals from the Kirby Dreamland games like Kirby Dream Land 2 and 3 are basically watching and enjoying themselves and are just, there you go. Yeah. Let's do this. And they're just watching them wail on Kirby and King Dedede wail on Wispy Woods. I don't know, I forgot about his name for a second. While Ribbon and Waddle Dee and Adeline are just cheering them on from the sidelines. Yeah, you could do it. You could do it. Despite the fact that Adeline wanted to just wanted to beat up the dark matter, so it was kind of fun. When he's like, "Come on!" But it kind of suffers from the same problem as the end, not to that extreme a degree, because this is not a 1-for-1 novelization. Because the Kirby game that this is novelization doesn't have any spoken dialogue. It doesn't even have any unspoken dialogue, like text boxes or something like that. It's all done with like body language in that game, so you can literally do whatever you want with the characters, with what they're saying, with how they're reacting, and it does add some things. But the simple fact that is it really should have added the boss fights in this story as well, which is something I kind of mentioned in my review of this story. It really should have just added the boss fights. I think having the boss fights be replaced by just a random out of the blue cutscene from a previous Kirby game really doesn't make sense. It makes sense for Dedede and Adeline, but then you have Waddle Dee, who's like, like even if the boss fight was like the boss fights were really short, like you couldn't just even attempt to do it. I mean, it could have been better on that front, but I'll give it a D. Do not ignore. Ignore. What? No. Delete. Yeah. Ignore this. There we go. I just realized there's an E. Yeah, it's okay, but for the most part, it does 1-for-1 it does 1-for-1 the cutscenes. They just add dialogue, and that's really not enough to kind of bump it, because we're not given like more to, I'll be generous. I'll bump it up to a C. I'm feeling generous. Let's go with Beyond the Shadow Looking Glass. Oh boy. This story. I will be frank. This story is not good. This story is really not good. It's going in the T tier. So why is it not good? Not only as a story, but also really stinks as a novelization. Because it's literally this story, just worse. Because United by the Crystal Shards, it is at least short. It's short enough that a fast enough reader could probably finish in like 15 minutes. It's that short. While Beyond the Shattered Looking Glass is over 100,000 is over 100,000 words, and it really poorly attempts to adapt it, because they okay. So this one is a weird one. It's the best way I can describe this story is it's trying to be a novelization, but at the same time, it's trying to be a retelling. And that's because the author wanted to incorporate more of an adventurous side by trying to change Alice's character. Like the author wanted to change Alice's character here, and completely failed. But in Reflections, he succeeded. It's really, really bad beyond how bad this story is as a novelization. It does incorporate a lot of the elements from the game, but it also changes how a lot of how everything's presented. Like, it does the boss fights, but they're more treated as inconveniences, and we're also given cutscenes to the I think it's been a while since I've read this story, because this is like the only one I've kind of partially blanked out of my mind. I believe this story also had cutscene parts of the story where it added in where she's in the asylum and she's doing stuff and she's messing with Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and I think there's a part where she attacks one of them with a spoon and tries to scoop out their eyeball. Disgusting, yes, but it also really doesn't make any sense, because at that point in time in the lore, Alice was basically in a coma. She was more or less in a coma for the entirety of the events of Wonderland, of specifically just that game. In Amanda's Return, she kind of goes through back and forth, like when she's in Wonderland she's awake, but in Wonderland she's sleeping, or she's like or like she's kind of in a stupor sort of thing. But in um in American McGee's Alice, she's literally for the most part, she's in a coma, and she really only wakes up when she defeats Red Queen. And so it's very off-putting that the author included these parts. Like I said, I can't remember. Hold on, you know what? I'm gonna go off camera. I'm actually gonna check to see if this story includes the asylum parts, or I'm thinking of a different story. Okay, so I just want to check. Yes, it does. This story does have parts where it is in the asylum. It does kind of make sense, because thematically it's supposed to represent Alice slowly curing herself, but at the same time it doesn't make sense, because it's specifically stated that in the lore that she only wakes up when she beats the Red Queen. She's pretty much lifeless as a corpse for everything except when she beats the Red Queen. And while all those parts are really cool, and honestly, those asylum parts are actually the best part of the story, because once you go into Wonderland, it's so droll and lifeless. Okay, I have to give American McGee credit. The guy knows how to tell a compelling story, and he's really good at he's a really, I don't know if he actually makes the art of the game, but he's really, really good at making the art of the game. And the author kind of just fumbled Wonderland. That's really why this story's endearing. The author massively dropped the ball with Wonderland itself, because Wonderland becomes boring. All the Wonderland parts are just dull and uninteresting, and the author does not add anything, because the author's trying to have his cake and eat it too. Like, oh, it's on one hand it's a novelization, on the other hand it's a retelling, and specifically just in the Wonderland parts, the author doesn't really know what to do with changing Alice's character, but also kind of keeping to a novelization. So it kind of becomes this weird, murky mess where the author is trying to change a bunch of things, but at the same time trying to keep everything the same, and it just causes so many problems with the structure of the story that it just massively falls apart. And that's why it's in a D tier. It's just such a mess structurally in the Wonderland parts that as a novelization it falls apart. As a story, it would be an F tier, because the concepts of changing the stuff in Wonderland is fine, because at best he's just trying to change a novelization into a retelling and really just bumbled it. But as a story itself, the Wonderland parts are just completely horrific to read. I did not like this story. If you want to read an Alice novel, an Alice story that he was actually good, read Reflection of Madness. That thing is a complete masterpiece. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 6 stories. So let's go with, let's do the Mega Mans. Let's get all of them out of the way. These are all novelizations. Let's do the Sonic one last. Of Mega Man's 3 to 7. I don't know why he only did 3 to 7. Don't ask me. I really don't. But these stories are okay from the novelization standpoint. It really just boils down to how well they adapt the novelization, because the thing with these stories is, one, there's not really a lot of plot. It's just a generic plot. Like, take Mega Man 3. It's just, oh, Wily was let out on good behavior, and so him and Light team up to build this gigantic robot named Gamma. Meanwhile, Mega Man has to fight all these other robot masters. Blah, 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 blah. He just gallivanting around. But in the novelization, it adds more context to it, to the not Mega Man side of things, because it always adds context to what's going outside of the games. But but inside the games, it kind of has the same problem as Beyond the Shadow Looking Glass, but just way better, because it doesn't. Because while the story does adapt the plots, it weirdly doesn't adapt the gameplay into a written environment. It still reads like you're reading a very, very stiff person's way of playing Mega Man. Like, once you get to once he's traveling through the stages, it reads so stiffly, it reads so horribly, which is such a shame, because as I said in my reviews of these stories, because I actually reviewed all of these stories together, because they were all samey, that I can get away with it. All the non-Mega Man stuff, like all the stuff with the Tokyo Senator and Mr. X and Kozak and all, and Kalinka and all that, that's done really well, and it's a really, really nice stuff. But that's adding stuff. But now you're probably wondering, well, then why isn't it a novelization? Because these new things just add context to the events of the game. Remember, these games, outside of Mega Man 7, they don't have a concrete plot. None of the characters really talk. There's only one in Mega Man 3. There's only one cutscene, maybe 2 cutscenes, one at the beginning, one at the end. So you can really, and because of how the game's structured, you need to find some time to bridge everything together. So having all these new characters that are exclusive to these stories and add nothing to the Mega Man, because once you get to the part where he's actually adapting the games, these guys don't really matter. They don't matter except for maybe the Tokyo Center once or twice. Doesn't matter. The only big plot change that happens is in Mega Man X6. No, not 6. 5, where Darkman turns out to be Docman, and he basically he's like, oh, I saw the Grim Reaper. It's like, I want to go back there. I was forced to, let me have this. Let me just, I'm about to die, so let me just spend some time with my brother before I go. Yeah. Give me a hug. Give me a hug, Mega Man. It's like, I don't want, give me a hug, please. But you have swords for your hands. Ignore those. Just wrap your arms around my waist. And then we also got the psychological aspects of Mega Man 6. But again, that doesn't really change much. So I would honestly have, okay, so I'm going to make this quick. 3 is C, B is 4, 4 is B, 5 is B, 7 is A, and then 6 is C. The reason I put A in A tier is because Mega Man 7 has a more coherent plot. There is more detail in the story going around it, with Wily getting released, making like backup robot masters to get him out of jail in case he gets arrested. The fact he causes so much chaos, and Mega Man's still struggling with the mental problems, and also the fact that unlike the rest of the stories, this story actually has like added context to the Bass plot with him, him going into and talking to the robot, and each robot master saying, I need you to do this, and this, and that, and make sure you lose to Mega Man. Like, okay. Except for Frieza, it's like, oh fuck no, I'm gonna kick his ass. Come on. And adds a lot more cutscenes, and adds a lot more tension and context to a lot of stuff. It gives actually a really good written fight with Proto Man. Really sells the bigger plot point of these stories, which is how far can you push the three laws of robotics, which is a really major plot point in the Mega Man X stories. Goes to the Machines. However, Ghost of the Machines is its own unique story. It's not a novelization. It's just a thing that exists. And the less I talk about that story, the better. But yeah, everything is good. They do add, like, these two stories. They add a lot new context to everything. Well, these ones are just they're there. Like, they do the job of being a novelization well enough, but they don't add context to barely anything. So that's why they get C tier. You know what? No, let's bump 3 to D and put 6, because I just remembered that Mr. X was an actual character in these stories, and they were like a side thing. He was the guy who was actually funding Dr. Light and Dr. Cossack's machine bots to build like more protective stuff like that, and helped in the financing of eventually Mega Man X. However, in Mega Man 6, in this story, he actually gets murdered by Wily because Wily has gone off the deep end and stuff like that. But this one just exists. The final novelization we have is Burning Arrow Wildfire Heart by Tarina, which is a novelization of Sonic and the Secret Rings on the Wii. And I honestly have mixed feelings on the story itself. It wasn't the greatest fan fiction because it weirdly kind of shoved Shara to the back and made her like massively irrelevant, and kept adding all these random elements that didn't add much to the story. Like it added. I mean, Shadow the Hedgehog as Jack Sparrow was actually pretty funny, but he didn't need to be there. He really didn't need to be in the story. Neither did Rouge the Bat as the King of Thieves' daughter, and also Amy. Amy as Shahrazad. That one kind of makes sense, and that one's at least kind of incorporated well, but she didn't really need to be there because you had Nimue in Black Knight. I don't know if this author is going to be doing a Black Knight novelization. So Amy is kind of like on the fringe. I mean, you could have just had Shara acting Shara is kind of like acting as Shahrazad, so you could have easily just fit Shara there. And also the fact that the big thing when it came to this novelization is the fact that it didn't focus on the dynamic between Sonic and Shara, because I still maintain the fact that when it comes to plots in Sonic games, Secret Rings is probably one of the best. But this story did it dirty, because it didn't. This one's like, honestly, this one's almost a retelling because of just how much because of how much characters they added and how kind of irrelevant the author made Shara. And I'm only putting this in because it doesn't change the overall plot. It just changes the dynamic of everything, because now you have a bigger group. You have Shar. I mean, Shar is completely, like, almost made irrelevant, where she should have been. The whole point of the story was focused on Shara, and just making her just a nothing character, like, oh, she might as well just be Navi or something like that from Legend, Ocarina of Time. It's so bad. However, on a novelization note, I do like the creativity. It doesn't really change the plot. It only, like I said, it only really adds Rouge, Amy, and Captain Shadow Sparrow. I couldn't resist. To the story, but doesn't really change the story that much. It does change how the final boss fight with Walefa goes, but that's kind of a minor thing, because it only gives more context of how Sonic was able to achieve the transformation in that boss fight, rather than changing the events of the boss fight itself. That the boss fights are actually pretty samey. I guess you could say the only real big plot point they changed was Eraser Jin kind of being, like, turned good, like, because he was good and he was corrupted by the rings, and he made a wish for Shara to be happy by curing him. I mean, but that's at the end. That's at the very end. I don't really think that counts. And I also do like the little touches of them breaking the fourth wall in a story, because the whole plot is Sonic gets sucked into the Arabian Nights. So them breaking the fourth wall, like the very very creative fourth wall when Knuckles transforms into Sinbad, and then, but he's like, oh, I'm still Knuckles, and then he gets kidnapped, and he's gone for an entire chapter, and then when they catch up again, he fully has the Sinbad persona, and then Shara points out, is like, well, he wasn't in the previous chapter at all, and that's actually really, really clever of incorporating so much of the literary terms and tropes into a kind of, like, into the meta narrative. Say what you want about this. It does the novelization pretty well, and it does add in just enough that I would put this as a C. As a story, it's shit. It's very underwhelming. It's just completely, massively, just, it's a meh story, but I have to give credit where credit's due on how it incorporates the game mechanics, the literary mechanics, because they mentioned plot holes and they mentioned Mary Sue's, and it incorporates a lot of literature stuff and does delve more deeper into the Arabian world. So on the novelization end, it gets a pass. Not a great pass, but just enough that I'm not gonna say it's bad. Now, just for fun, if I did do the tier list based on the quality of story, it would look like this. It would look like this. It would look like this. This is. If I rate the stories on the stories, no, wait. That's how I rate the stories based on the quality of the stories themselves. So I will see you next time. Like I said, the story was made when I just woke up. Video was made when I just woke up. Next week, I already finished the next review. It's going to be Shadow Chaser's Risen Nemesis by Lux Nero. name sounds very familiar. I don't know why. Sounds like a YouTuber name. So I will see you next time. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and